U.S. President Donald Trump hasn't ruled out the possibility of a recession. He had the opportunity to reassure businesses when asked about the strength of the economy in a Fox News interview. Instead, he warned to brace for a period of transition as he pushes forward with tariffs.
I know that you inherited a mess, and you said that the other night.
I've only been here,
but are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing.
Well, Trump's tariffs have brought uncertainty to the North American economy and upended the Canada-U.S. relationship. My next guest has been an outlier in the Republican Party, speaking out against Donald Trump. Don Bacon is a Republican representative from Nebraska, and he joins us now. Congressman, thank you for joining us here on Power and Politics.
Thank you, David.
It's a difficult time for the relationship between our two countries. What do you make of this particular moment that Canada and the United States are in, sir?
I don't disagree with the tone and the things that have been said from our president towards the prime minister or towards Canada itself. This is what I tell people, in our local media or national media here. Canada has been in compliance with the USMCA trade deal. I would be candid with you, Mexico is not. They've been blocking our corn and things like that. But Canada's been living by the agreement, and we should respect that. And so I've not been supportive of tariffs against Canada. And I think with any of our allies, as long as, it's fair trade, we should have free trade. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we've Canada, the United States has that. I know the president's mentioned, the issues with fentanyl, but these are things that America and Canada can work towards. Does not force us to have to turn to tariffs to get this fixed. And we know that the vast majority of fentanyl comes from our southern border, but that doesn't mean we can't do better on the northern border for both sides. And I'm reminded that America and Canada has been friends for roughly 2 centuries. And I've flown through Canada. When I was in the United States Air Force, I have been a tourist in Canada, and I have the utmost respect for our Canadian friends. And we should be respectful to our neighbors. And I frankly find it very childlike, the name calling and calling the prime minister governor and so forth. So this American is grateful for our close friendship with our northern neighbors.
Well, Congressman, we have had quite a few Americans on this program who agree with your position. They've almost all been Democrats. I think you're the first Republican, certainly at the congressional level, who has said this publicly. I mean, how widespread is this? Because we hear from Canadian officials who go to Washington that privately Republicans will say many of the things you're saying, but they're not prepared to do it publicly and they're not prepared to disagree with the president. Where do you think things stand there?
Well, I'm a military guy. I am a conservative at heart, and I'm a Ronald Reagan child, if you will, but I also believe in being respectful. And as a Christian and as an American, I'm those two things first. And I believe in trying to do what's right. Normally, when I do what's right, I align on the Republican side. But right now, I think there's a lot of fear for not looking like a team. You're not being a loyal teammate. But I'd rather be loyal to the truth. I'd rather be loyal to a higher calling and higher goods versus just a loyal to an individual who I don't think is right in this case. And most folks that I come from the Midwest, or Midwest nice, we have a little more of the Ronald Reagan background. We're not a populist. We're not into isolationism and things like that. So I think the vast majority of Republicans feel the way I do, but they're worried about not looking like a team player, for one. And I've been on the receiving end of, I would say, the populist hate on social media during the speaker's fight, during the last election. And it's never changed me. I am who I am, and I let the voters decide, and thankfully I've been on the receiving end and now performing the top of the ticket for our party, typically between 7 and 11%. So I feel like you stick to your moral compass, you try to do what's right. I know good people can disagree, treat people respectfully, and good things happen.
But you mentioned the social media hate and the populism, and this is a challenge for Republicans, isn't it, sir? That if you don't quite close to the president on a lot of things, you can get primaried and mobilized against. And one of the biggest social media platforms, well, Elon Musk is obviously in the Oval Office quite a bit. I mean, how much of a threat is that for Republicans who do want to break ranks with Donald Trump, in your view?
It is a threat. We've had primaries, so I've won 5 general elections. And of those 5 generals, I had 4 primaries. This last one I had was the best guy they could come up with on the MAGA side, if you will. And I feel like I'm more conservative than they, by the way. I think populism is not conservatism, in my view. I believe in true conservative ideology, not this populism, isolationism that really was republicanism in the 1930s that failed. But I'll give you an example. When I was involved in the speaker's fight and I took a stand, I got 31,000 phone calls in 1 week. I had threats against me, threats against my wife, threats against people who financially supported me. And I didn't back down an inch. I leaned into it and we prevailed. And it triggered a primary in 2024. And I leaned into it. I didn't back down. I stuck to my principles and we won 62-38. And then these same people said, well, we won't vote in the general election. You'll lose in the general. And we ended up winning only by 2%, but my district won for Harris by 5%. And so I had a 7-point spread there. So again, I think is my goal to win an election. Like, you hate losing, and I prefer not losing, but I'd rather not lose my soul first. And I'd rather go down in history books as trying to do the right thing. And I say that, I don't want to sound pompous because I know good people can disagree. But if we all try to do the right thing, then you can find consensus a lot easier and solve problems. And in the end, we got to be honest. Canada and America have 2 centuries of friendship. We're blessed by that. Do we have things that we want to do better with each other? Absolutely. But we should talk about it. And friends should be able to do that behind closed doors in a respectful manner and not kick each other in the shins on social media and in public.
You know, Congressman, it's a very refreshing perspective to hear what you say. This is not what a lot of people say and do in politics increasingly, you know, as populism becomes more ingrained, certainly in this period in our history. I just wonder, how do we get through this particular period as a country? Because retaliation has started here in earnest with like electricity being tariffed, you know, coming out of Ontario to Minnesota to Michigan to New York, talks of cutting it off if necessary, finding ways to just inflict economic pain on Americans. And your stock market it's in rough shape, you know, trillions of dollars being lost and the possibility of a recession. So there's no winners in this, just losers. So how do we get through this if you are so notable as a singular Republican and the president doesn't seem to be willing to shift course?
I think in the end, favorable polling or lack of favorable polling will have an impact. And I think Americans are going to feel some of this impact. But one thing I learned, I'm a 5-time commander in the Air Force, served multiple times in the Middle East. I was a base commander at Ramstein in Germany, which many Canadians have operated out of there. I was commander at Offutt Air Force Base that runs all of our nuclear strategic weapons. One thing you learn, war has unintended consequences. You may think it's easy. The Russians, when they invaded Ukraine, thought they were going to win in 2 weeks. It's been 3 years and it's 80,000 casualties later for Russia, right? Or 800,000, excuse me, casualties later. And so I'd say the same thing with the trade war that has unintended consequences. And we should be more quick to work things out first before, you know, setting the first shot. And so how's this going to finish? I think it will take more Republicans to speak up because that's the center of gravity for the president right now. We have a bare majority in the House and the Senate. And if more Republicans speak up, he has to listen because you got a 1-seat majority, 2-seat majority. And I think that will make a difference. I think polling, he's very watches the polls. And frankly, the president won this election fair and square, but he won it based on the economy, where inflation outpaced wages, the southern border, crime, also wanting energy independence. And by the way, I welcome the energy partnership we have with Canada. So talking beyond Canada, we want to ensure we don't import energy from Venezuela, the Middle East. We want to be able to undercut Russia and their exports and Iran and their exports. Right. And finally, we got to restore deterrence. And as Afghanistan hurt us and hurt the previous administration, that's what people voted for. I don't think they voted to have a trade war with Canada. I don't think they voted to kiss up to Vladimir Putin and the invasion of Ukraine. And if they would have known that, the elections would have been different. So I recommend to the president, stick with what you want on, and he will do well. He will do well if he does that.
Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska. Go Cornhuskers. Thanks for being here, sir. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.